Thank you so much for watching my show. William Wallace for America. With me today in this interview is Shad Sullivan. He's been on a lot of other shows, not only Glenn Beck and a bunch of other really top name ones, but I think that his information is paramount to what you need to be paying attention to. In our country, we live in a time of information where some people see information as that's conspiracy, or that's never going to happen. But when you meet people that things have really happened to, that have not only information and they're putting it out there and they're putting themselves out there, more and more eyes are starting to open, which I think when you listen to what he has to say, your eyes are going to open up a lot wider. Shad, how are you doing today? Thank you so much and welcome to the show.
Well, thanks, Bill. I appreciate you asking me on. I'm doing well.
Well, you're just, as you said, you're just an American cattle rancher. Is that correct?
That's right. That's all I am.
Well, you started this journey a while back. You kind of said you did a random video, on it to get started. Is that from just passion of being an American, passion about being a cattle rancher, or passion about freedom and property rights?
Yeah, really, it's all of the above. But what happened to me and my family back in 1999 really catapulted me to where I am today. And what happened is my dad had kind of a deal with the State Land Board of Colorado, and we had bought a ranch, and then the State Land Board, in the very first of its kind in a public-private partnership with the Nature Conservancy, seized the land from my family. And so that planted a seed of all that is corrupt in the American bureaucracy.
What
right?
gave them the right to steal your land?
Nothing gave them the right. And it was just kind of it's a long story to get into, but it was a bad deal. And, that's the whole goal of all of these bureaucratic organizations, is to take the land from the people. Everything that we talk about today coming up, it's not about the carbon capture. It's not about carbon credits or cattle farting or any of this stuff. It's all about the land. And that little happening wasn't a little happening. It was a big happening, planted a seed in me. And
How many acres?
It was almost 50,000 acres. And so it planted a seed in me that just kind of boiled over for years. And then in 2014, an organization came to Southeast Colorado and wanted to put what they called a national heritage area over 8 counties in Southeast Colorado. And we did not know about this. The information was leaked to us from a National Park Service employee. And we formed a coalition in Southeast Colorado to start that. And we defeated that in terms of property rights. But it planted this seed in me. And as information and technology came to be, I became more and more, passionate about it, more serious about it. And I love freedom and liberty. I love America. I love our homeland. So if you fast forward to 2020, and listen, I love Trump. So I voted Trump in 2016. We did have a black swan event in the cattle industry in 2015 and 2019. But then in 2020, we all know what happened. COVID came along. We saw them destroying our harvests, whether it was fruits and vegetables, hogs or chickens, our poultry industry. They destroyed our harvest because they couldn't, with the spread of COVID, we could not get all of the workers into these plants to get food products into the supply chains. And so one day when I was out working in the pasture, we got an email, and it was from the USDA. And that email said, we are going to send teams of people to help with the alternative marketing and or disposal of your cattle herds. And listen, we were in a bad way at the time. We could not market any cattle. We could not process any cattle. And I knew exactly what they were saying, between the lines, that they were going to start euthanizing harvest-ready cattle, because harvest-ready cattle in the feed yard cannot wait. They have to be harvested. And so my dad had told me about in the 1930s and the 1950s, due to disease and drought, the federal government did come out and euthanize animals on the farms and ranches all across America. And so I knew this was possible, and it just kind of set wrong with me.
Is it just a bureaucrat that said, "Hey, we just got to get rid of them," or is it somebody that's connected to the economics of, maybe it's a bureaucrat that's speaking to some
Sure.
economic advisor that says, if all this gets on the market, it's to bring prices way down, and that
That's
just wouldn't be good for the big guys.
Well,
Is
and I mean, it was a mix of things, but that was sure enough a part of it. And then, of course, there was no workers in the plants. You couldn't get the cattle killed. I mean, we just couldn't.
So what
And
does it matter to them? What does it matter to them if y'all just decide to keep the cattle? It's on your private
well,
land with your private property.
but you don't understand the segmented industry of the beef industry. You have the cow calf producer on the land, you have a stalker producer on the land, but then when those cattle go into the feed yard, they don't come back out. They cannot come back out. They have to be harvested. And so that was what was putting the pressure on the supply chain, because these cattle were backing up in the feed yard because they were not getting harvested in the processing plants because there was no workers. They were all sick from the COVID, right? And so it just kind of set wrong with me that the federal government took that into their hands. And I did this video and it went viral. And at that time, I didn't even know, Bill, what viral meant. It went all over the world. People related to it. It was just a common rancher talking, and that's really what catapulted me in to the public eye, per se. I had always been a writer. I've been doing, op-eds and such for a long time. But that catapulted me into that. And then, more op-eds came, and all of this bureaucratic corruption is coming at us at once since COVID, right?
Right.
Including property rights issues, some that we'll talk about today. But I ended up through that video. I ended up on the high wire with Dale Bigtree in 2021, and he came out and did a show. He came out to our ranch and did a show, and then I was on the Patrick Bet David show, and then Fox News came a call, and and then last year, the New York Stock Exchange, at the request of the Securities and Exchange Commission, I'm sorry, flip that. At the request of the New York Stock Exchange, the Securities and Exchange Commission proposed to put what they call natural asset companies on the New York Stock Exchange. That's a property rights issue. And I wrote a property rights op-ed about natural asset companies. And that got national attention and exposure. And that's when Glenn Beck called, and I was on his show. So there's been a lot of things in my life that have rounded me to this point and played together in terms of freedom and liberty. That's my first fight. Property rights. None of it's available to us without the right to own private property.
Right.
And then my family and community and our ability to feed the world. And so I'm just passionate about America. I love America. I love my homeland. And I see our liberties being stripped from us every single day. And so that's how I got here, Bill.
Because of federal bureaucracies. So you mentioned you referred to a black swan event that happened in 2015 and 2016. What was that?
So we had gone through a fairly tough drought from 2009 to 2011 and 12. We built the cow herd back up, started building the cow herd back up. The market went sky high, higher, faster than ever in history. We were given lots of money for these cattle, getting lots of money for the cattle. And then in 2015, it just broke. And it broke for a plethora of reasons. A saturated market, global corruption, global corporate corruption, all of it working together and in tandem to really kill and decimate the American cattle rancher. And so there were a lot of operations that went out of business in 2015. And then again in 2019, we kind of meandered along there. And then in 2019, a real black swan event came calling, and it was a fire in a meat processing plant in southwest Kansas, and it actually took $40 a hundred in equity away from our operations over a 2-day period.
So
And
your story, what you're saying, you really know a lot about this industry. But before I start asking you some questions about the things that I brought you on for, that I think America has to really worry about,
mhm,
because they might be looking at you and going, "Hey, I'm not a cattle rancher. This is not going to affect me." But when we start talking about the things that are going to affect the cattle ranchers directly, we're going to talk about how much it's going to affect private citizens also.
sure.
But in a nutshell, going way back to the beginning, is there like one law or something, or one thing that the government triggered, was a trigger for them to be able to take all your property initially? Was there like one thing that they said, without going into the long story, was there like one thing, or they just had their eyes on your property? Your property is a key place, and they just kind of pulled out the RICO Act and farmland on you, so to speak, to get your property?
Well, what has happened is all of these issues are not new, Bill. And thanks to the United Nations and those people who dangle the carrot over the United Nations, those global elites, they have been coming after our property for a long time. And, this is not new in history. Hitler did it. Stalin did it, used public-private partnerships to actually influence government agencies and government directives. And so those global elite that I often talk about, and that was one of my articles that went viral, was called "The War on Beef." Those global elites, or I call them the global cabal, are the ones that are pulling the strings, right? And in order for them to implement the one world order, they have to have control of the land, and so they had to implement this from the top to the bottom, this control mechanism. And what it is they called it climate change. And in order for them to, who doesn't get scared at the word climate change? Oh my gosh, the climate is changing.
Right.
But they had to make us feel better about it, right? And then they developed a solution, and that solution is sustainable development. We hear about it all the time. So sustainable development, in short, is just production and consumption control. But in order to put that one world government in across the world, and they know that America is the stronghold of freedom and liberty, they have to come up with some alternative measures to do this, because they have to get a hold of the land. So what are they doing now? Executive Order 14008, America the Beautiful. That's the 30 by 30. Conservation rules are going into place like crazy right now, where our broke federal government is paying landowners all over the United States to implement conservation rules on their place. Conservation easements held by private companies that are in public-private partnerships with other environmental organizations, governmental organizations, all sorts of these mechanisms to gain a foothold of control onto the land. And that's where we're at today. And they're coming like crazy.
Is that what 3030 is? This control? Is there anything else about it that we can put on people's radars so they can kind of detect it?
30 by 30 is President Biden's Executive Order 14008. It is it was originally called the 30 by 30, which meant that their goal, along with a partnership through the United Nations, was to set aside 30% of America's land and waters for preservation by 2030. Okay. Now, that is only going to be followed up by the 50 by 50, which comes straight from the United Nations, and that's the world's water and land in preservation by 2050. Okay, President Biden signed that executive order, and it's nefarious in nature. People know that, so they have to go around the whole issue to help gain a foothold on these lands. So in other words, through the USDA and the Farm Service Agency, you can enroll your privately owned land in a conservation program through the federal government. And what they will do is they'll pay you so much per acre to set it aside for preservation, greatly reducing productivity on the land, and thereby taking all decisions away from the landowner, right? So if I'm a landowner and I put it into a publicly funded, say, conservation program of any kind, and then I want to, let's say we want to put a power solar farm, or if we want to do something private with it, a campground or whatever it may be, maybe a plethora of things. We now have to get their permission to do that on our own land. Well,
It doesn't sound like the government being sneaky, so to speak. Now I'm saying that in jest, of course. It sounds like this is a reason why we need more and more people to pay attention, because it might sound like, oh wow, the government's gonna pay me just to have this, keep this
yes,
land pristine and nice, and wow, what a great idea! I get paid just to have it,
well,
but they don't realize that they're giving up not only their rights, but they're giving the government permission to come in at any time they
correct.
want to do what they want with it.
That's correct. And they are giving up all of their future development rights. So let's
So it's a
take, for example,
combination of the government being sneaky and people needing to pay attention and be aware.
that's correct. And this is where you were talking earlier about the Sustains Act. The Sustains Act is a very vital part of the government's control onto these conservation programs. So let's take, for example, back 25 years ago, they came into Southeast Colorado, and it was all different environmental organizations, and said, hey, would you be interested in putting a conservation easement on your ranch? And many broke ranchers said, yeah. What does that entail? Well, we'll pay you $100 per acre to give us the future development rights and to set it aside for preservation, and greatly reduce your productivity on the land, whatever that productivity may be. So broke ranchers took the money. Yes, it was great. They made contracts, and guess what? Some of the contracts were overvalued, and so the buyer of the easement gets a tax credit, right? And so it may have been the Nature Conservancy comes in and gives you $100 an acre for your land, and then they get the future development rights. They get all control. It's a crazy situation, and then they get a tax credit, and it doesn't have to be an environmental organization. It could be any business or any organization, and they make a deal with the federal government.
So this goes back to the public-private relationships that
Correct.
like that Hitler put together, that
Correct.
other people
And
get together to steal land. It's these private partnerships that the government sets up with their friends. Hey, we want to take. I mean, of course, they don't say it like this, or maybe they do. Who knows? We want to be able to take over private property. So you set up this wink, wink nonprofit that's going to keep America beautiful. What's wrong with a nonprofit that says keep America beautiful, and we're going to give you all tax credits to be able to do that, and they'll give you the money to be able to pay the landowners, and you skim a little bit off the top, you get some tax credits, everybody's happy. 20 years from now, we're owning it.
And then on top of that, that land is in conservation or in an easement in perpetuity for the rest of our existence on Earth, right? And that goes along with that property. So what they're doing is basically they're dictating, when you choose to take that, and it is a property rights issue as a landowner, you can choose to do that, but you're dictating from the grave. And so steps in the Sustains Act, what you were just talking about, which, by the way, was sponsored by G.T. Thompson, a Republican. And what that does is it lifts up to the top public-private partnerships to help landowners force conservation upon their land. So, in other words, it prioritizes public-private partnerships to edify or enhance conservation practices from the federal government to these private individuals. So it's just like taking, the most radical environmental organization in the world, the World Wildlife Fund. They can come in and they can give the USDA, say, $100 million. Well, what does that do to the taxpayers? That nullifies what the taxpayer wants and says, but he's still forced to give the USDA his money, but then it's being influenced by these organizations, outside organizations, through their $100 million to create and implement rules that didn't go through Congress. And
Who's
that's what
coming up with these schemes?
it's horrible. That's what the Sustains Act really does. And in the
And
act,
a Republican came up with it.
and sponsored.
I'm fighting for your
by,
freedom, your liberty.
yeah,
I'm Mr. Joe
yeah,
Blow, Republican, and I'm here for
that's
you with
right.
my conservative values. That one day that I'm gonna pave the way for the government to steal your land. Question: are these contracts contracts cancelable? Are they non-cancelable?
It depends on the contract. A conservation easement is non-cancelable. It is in perpetuity forever. A contract that you may sign with the USDA or the FSA office may have a length to it. It needs to have an ending period to it. So maybe it's in length for 10 years or 15 years. But the whole idea behind that is that the federal government is giving you money to put their rule system in, which you're going to have to abide by to enter the market, right? And that's what it's all about. And so my fear is later on down the road, after you've taken hundreds of thousands of tax-paying dollars from the American people through the Farm Service Agency or the USDA, whichever it is, to implement a conservation program, the feds will come back and say, hey, nothing's for free. We just gave you, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now we get a portion of that land or all of it. See, but what it does, all of these are working in tandem for the 30 by 30. That's what it is.
So what fits on top? 30 by 30, the Sustains Act. Where do they originate? What's the hierarchy here that I'm kind of seeing? Because you've mentioned.
Well, the hierarchy is they're really. I would say the 30 by 30 was created as the beginning, right under the United Nations and their foot soldiers, to gain control of the land. You were right when you said Hitler did it. He had public-private partnerships. So did Stalin, and that's how they gained control of the land. This is exactly what they did. But the 30 by 30 program, the conservation easements have been around for a while. The way they implement all of these programs, Bill, is very incrementally, because these organizations, as nefarious as they are very patient. They know they can't do it overnight.
So this is like, I mean, they got a long game on their mind. They're not worried about this generation because they know this generation's going to fight. So it's up to us to wake up as many people as we can in this generation to be able to make, if not pivot during our time, be able to have it out there where our children can pivot, from it, because hopefully we open up, but we inform enough people now that it doesn't have to be, it could be a peaceful transition and not one where they have to fight themselves out of.
Well, the very first thing we have to do is we have to teach our kids that the very foundation of liberty and freedom is private property rights. The ability to own private property, whether it's your farm, your ranch, your coat, a gun, yourself, your car, whatever it is to help you put food on the table. That's what we have to teach our kids, that the foundation of liberty and freedom is private property. And we have to teach those so they will defend private property down the road. Now, all across the nation, you see these trade organizations and people. Let's take Florida, for example, right now. Colorado went through it. Texas is going through it. All of this development, right? All of these people moving into these states, building homes, taking land out of production. Okay, I get it. I see that, taking land out of production is not what I want to do. I'm not for it. But I would rather take all land out of production and put homes on it and let private individuals own it all day long than to let the federal government own the land. That's
actually a great point. So there's a lot of other things that are tied into this. Like, I guess what comes to mind, because we started out talking about you being a cattle rancher. Mm-hmm. And so at first I was thinking, well, this is a war on beef, but it sounds to me like it's really a war on property rights. and but it sounds like beef is kind of one of the narratives that allow them to be able to sneak in through the back door.
Okay, let's talk about this. So I always say beef and liberty. Where there is beef, there is freedom. Why is that? If you are a beef producer, you have to have land. They're the major landowners across the world. Beef producers are. We have to have land to produce beef. And so that's why I say it's not about the cow, it's about the land. And remember that the war on beef, and it is a war on beef because there are ideologues out there that do not want you eating meat, animal rights activists that do not want you, you know, slaughtering cattle and all that
Beef is
stuff.
just a shiny object right now.
Um, what you have to remember is that uh, beef is beef is not the problem. That's not the
Right.
problem. The problem is the anti-freedom, anti-liberty ideology. That's what this all boils down to. It's all about when I say the war on beef, I'm talking about the war on the charters of freedom, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution. You see that? And that's what this is, because they hate freedom and liberty. They hate it. And the only way to uphold freedom and liberty is your access to natural resources to make a living how you see fit with what you own. It's all about private property. So they use beef as the excuse to come after the private land. And
It's
this is
almost like the
happening.
farmer. It's almost like the farm. The beef farmers are the protectors of the land, and
Correct.
they are protecting freedom and liberty on that
Correct.
parcel of ground that they have. So the
Correct.
war on beef is really just the narrative being used to get to the farmers, to put them out of business, to be able to implement their 30 by 30
There you
plan
go.
through the Sustains Act,
That's
created by
correct.
a Republican.
Yes, but it's
The-
highly supported by Democrats too. See, the
What
Republicans and Democrats are wings on the same bird.
Right. Now, do you have? And I always like to talk about proof. Like, I trust you. I know you're accurate. I know you're 100%. But do you have something at this point that of our interview that you can say to our listeners? Go to this to get more proof.
Well, yeah. I mean, just take for example the Sustains Act. All you have to do is Google the Sustains Act or go to the USA.gov website, and you can find all this very easily. And that was one of that was when I did my Glenn Beck interview. I had some hometown people that are so far removed from food production. Once you get 3 generations removed from
Right.
your source of food, you don't have that wisdom and knowledge about your food system. And they saw me on the Glenn Beck show or on Fox News or something, and I had said something about the march to eating bugs, and the USDA is financing bug farms all over the United States. That is not a secret. We are putting ground up crickets.
Oh, that's that conspiracy talk again,
I
Shad. Come
know.
on,
I
man.
hate to be conspiratorial, but this guy that owns this huge business, he's like, in my own town, he's like, "You're so full of it." And I said, "You know what? Just Google it." And so he did, and he's like, "Oh my gosh!" And all of this stuff is truly coming to fruition, and so it's not hard to find any of this
It's
stuff.
almost like people thought the chemtrails are the conspiracy, but just the other day they came out with an article that they're admitting that they're doing cloud seeding
Yeah,
to implement
more and
rain. They're
more,
just messing with the weather. So
more and
I've
more.
I've kind of did some research. Remnants of all that we're talking about have also been found in the Paris Climate Accord. And while I know that's not your level of expertise, is
Right.
that accurate that pieces of this are found in the Paris Climate Accord?
Well, of course it is. And you know what? You could go to the United Nations website. You'll find their 17 sustainable development goals. I mean, all of it is out there for the world to see. It used to be a secret. It's not a secret anymore. All of this is very available on the internet. It is it's nefarious, it's crazy, it's conspiratorial, but it's all true. That's the thing. And
It's
we're headed down the wrong road. And
it's
and but
almost
I
like Obama when he said he wants to fundamentally change America.
This
It's
is
almost
it.
like It's almost
this
like
is
Biden. They're telling us what they're telling us, and not because they're trying to warn us, but because they're so arrogant,
they're
and
narcissistic, arrogant,
they've already have been able to acquire so much power. It's
power.
almost like, okay, we're telling you so you have the chance to submit, you know, or not submit, and go quietly or go hard,
Well, I mean,
painfully.
that's just it. And they are implementing so many production rules and standards across the United States. Let's take the EID, forced EID, RFID, EID chip into the
Or
cattle.
RFID chips, right?
RFID chips. Let's just say, okay, so for now, they're calling it for disease traceability. We all know it's not for disease traceability. We already have a disease traceability system, a very good one in the United States. We have the best beef production in the world right here, and it's all about. We go back to climate change. It's all about sustainable development and allowing picking and choosing those individuals who get to play in the market. So if you abide by their rules, and so for right now, what they want to do on the animal on the APHIS website, their stated goal on that website is to track that piece of steak or whatever it may be from birth clear to the plate. That's their intended goals. And in order for them to do that, they have to put RFID, EID all the way through the supply chain system. Well, the American ranchers like, no way, you don't get that much control over us. However, there are trade organizations in the United States, and some of their members are promoting this as disease traceability. But the key issue here is down the road, not right now, but down the road, when they have access to all of this production data that
Right.
is stored in the ear tag on an animal, then they can come to you and say, okay, we don't agree with your production standards. We don't, your carbon footprint is too high. We don't believe in how you're doing this. So you, in the name of climate change, you have to reduce your cattle herd size by 40%. Okay, well, somebody would say, you got to be kidding me. That cannot happen in the United States. Well, guess where it already happened? It happened in Ireland. It happened in the Netherlands. They put the RFID chip in there. Even the committee chair of the RFID committee at the National Cattlemen's Beef Association said in 2011, said, we can wave a wand and know how many cattle you have on your ranch. Well, that in there lies the problem. That's not what the American people want. They want their productivity to be overseen by themselves. They want it to be private. And once you get all this data into a federal system, then we have more problems. Not only is it a breach of privacy, it's a breach of everything the Constitution, you know, guarantees. But then you have these nefarious organizations, say extreme animal rights organizations, extreme environmental organizations, whoever it may be, coming to the data centers and saying, we want a FOIA request, this Shad Sullivan's production records, and then they can publish that to the world, right? So it opens up this whole
He
can of
wasn't giving
worms.
his cows enough to make sure his cows get enough water in that drought last year.
That's
We
right.
need to cull his herd and take
That's
his
right.
land.
That's right.
This is, and what's interesting is this is going so much under the radar and so much undercover that I would say 95% of Americans have no clue, have
Oh,
no idea that this is going on.
none.
On this. This is not only nefarious. This is a way, like I said, it's an attack on farmers' rights, on land rights. And once they get full control of our food system and our land, we're
Correct.
done.
That's correct. It's all about control of the supply chain, because you have to remember these global cabal, these global elitists, and many of them are Americans. They believe in population reduction. In the name of climate change, we have to reduce population. They're eugenicists. And if you can control the food supply chain, you can control who gets food and who doesn't. I mean,
They're
this
still trying.
sounds so far-fetched, Bill. All of
No,
this sounds so far-fetched, but it's happened before. history repeats itself. And so we have to make a choice today. I'm always preaching on this. You have to make a choice today. Are you going to choose tyranny, or are you going to choose liberty and freedom? Because it's all about your legacy. My life is lived. I'm 50 years old. You know, if I died today, I've lived a wonderful life, but I want my kid to taste that sweet taste of freedom and liberty.
Right.
And so this is all about our legacy and what we're going to do for those who come behind us. And we can see that in the schools they're not being taught about history, and so these kids are totally ignorant to what can happen. They've put their trust in the federal government, the state government. We saw that during COVID. My gosh, the people that put a mask on their face and gave themselves shots that they didn't even know what they were putting in their
Right.
body, and now they're dying and they're sick and their health is flailing.
Mm.
And if why didn't we learn? Why? Well, and I think we did learn, but it showed you the amount of independence that we have given up in the name of comfort and safety. Right?
It's also that more and more of our electorate are willfully ignorant to what is going on. It's too difficult to do the work to get the information like we're talking about here. But then because the information, the truth is harder to accept than the soft lies.
Sure.
It's like, take this little pill, you're gonna be
Yes.
all right. Where do you think the biggest threat to freedom is right now?
Ooh, that is a loaded question, because that's coming on all fronts. I'm a cattle rancher, so I do everything in my perspective as a beef producer, as a cattle rancher. Number one, in agriculture is property rights attacks on private property, and your ability to produce how you see fit. However, in the secular world, in that other world, man, I'm just sitting here telling you, and I hate to even say this on air, but I believe that we're living under the most corrupt government on earth right here in the United States. And
Right.
I think they are a threat to our republic. And I will not say democracy, because we don't live in a democracy. That word is being thrown around like like candy, but we have to save this republic. And that's why it's important to understand, when at the end of the day, when I talk to people, they're like, what can we do? And I say, well, the first thing we have to do is we have to end corruption. And how do we end corruption? Well, we end that pay to play system in Washington, D.C. and all across America. We should not be able to lobby and influence opinion instead of fact by money. That is wrong on every level. Every legislators should have to read and reread all of these bills. But I do think that our leadership is a huge threat to democracy right now.
We're a big. It's almost not to trump you, no pun intended, but I think one of our biggest problems is in the bureaucratic agencies.
Absolutely.
Because what's happened is these elected officials have found that they can use the bureaucratic agencies to weave their nefarious plans
Yes.
into our American fabric in a way to be able to benefit from not only the lobbyists and the big corps and everything like that, in such a way that they're not. And look, politicians aren't even thinking about freedom and liberty. They just want to keep their phony baloney jobs and stay elected.
Correct.
And that's all.
Correct.
That's all that comes down to.
Correct.
In that. So we talked about what the biggest threat on freedom is in America, and I know that we've mentioned this throughout, and it's going to come up again through the rest of our interview here. But what else do you have your eyes on that in all of this that you think we need to keep an eye out for?
Oh, that's a loaded question too. I mean, there's just so many issues. Congress has allowed, our Congress, who hasn't done their job, has allowed so many acquisitions and mergers of these global corporate companies to take over every facet of our lives in the United States. That is very important. We need to break these people that are breaking antitrust laws, break them up. And I mean, that's from the food system down, all of it. I think that is very important. we have all of this corruption, this pay to play, this lobbying in the United States that is influencing so much. Congress has given up their rulemaking powers to acts like the Sustains Act and given that over to agency heads to make those rules on their whim, and that's not constitutional. That's
That's
a
right.
huge problem. And you go back to what you said a while ago with President Obama and that one phrase, and I use that phrase on the Glenn Beck show, was fundamental change. That was the fundamental change. We weaponized the USDA. We weaponized the FDA. We weaponized all of these agencies, and they have taken that and taken advantage of it, of the people. So now we're governing from the top down instead of from the
Right.
bottom up of the way it's supposed to be. We are so out of control in this nation that the people have to take back control. And I think that's what the people are seeing in this Trump campaign, is that, everybody knows Trump is not perfect. Everybody knows
Right.
that. But
Exactly.
everybody also knows that Trump loves America. And what they have done, see, your actions are displayed in your fruits. And what they have done over the last 20 years is show that the American people are not number one. Look at the money we've sent to Ukraine. Look at the money we've sent to Taiwan this week. Look at all of this. We got people in North Carolina going through these floods. We had fires in the Texas Panhandle. People lost vast ranches and
Right.
every single animal that they had to make a living with. Same thing in Wyoming. We see all of this stuff in the western states on BLM lands that aren't being used now. They've taken the power away from the people, and we have to take that power back. And I think that's what they see through the Trump campaign, honestly.
Well, and I love the point that you make, that he's not a perfect person. And a lot of people say, well, he's not an eloquent speaker and he rambles, and that just shows that he's getting senile or whatever. I said, no, the reality is this: Trump speaks like a regular human. He's not a polished politician. And the reason why I think people can connect with him is because he speaks on like all of us. Like, we're not polished. We stammer, we stutter, we think of something and we kind of go off track on different things because it's a shiny object and it's interesting. And that's how regular, normal human beings connect and communicate, just on a very random level like that. And Trump has that ability to connect with people on a very personal level. But I'm going to go backwards another minute. We talked about the regulatory agencies and regulations. I want to bring up that tagging thing again, because I think that's really important. When you talk about tagging the population, it's not only a way to adhere or submit to the regulations. Couple questions. Are there ways to change those regulations? But can the people, the cattle ranchers, I mean, look, there's probably not enough cattle ranchers, but what can we, the people, do to change those regulations? But also, I understand one of those regulations is that why that y'all cannot cross state lines.
Correct.
And the RFID chips have something to do with that. Can you answer some of those questions for me?
Okay, well, first of all, the first problem that we face with the RFID EID is that
Right.
90 to 95% of the ranchers across America, or beef producers across America, have no idea it's happening. They have no idea. They don't understand it. They don't know what it's for. They don't know its purpose. They have no idea. Number two, we have the people that are pushing it and that are for it are from government agencies who have the climate change agenda on their mind, cattlemen's trade organizations who have the pay to play on their mind. Those companies are keeping them going. You have individuals and private companies, tag manufacturers, that want the money. It's going to be a heyday for them, right? And so we have that fight that we're against. So the American producer who does not want this invasion of privacy, he has to do two things. He has to stand up right now, make his voice heard. We have done that. We have enabled that at RCAF USA. You can go to the RCAF USA website and sign a petition against the mandate, which starts November 5th. Okay. Number two, we have filed a lawsuit with the NCLA to stop this implementation. Now, I don't think we're going to get it stopped before November 5th, but if it happen, if we can get it into the courts right after, we can retract it and then put an end to it totally.
If we get the right president, we can make sure that it gets taken out, right?
That's correct. And Representative Harriet Hagman out of Wyoming, she's really the one. Her and RCAF USA are really the people that have been behind stopping it. See, this has been in since the early 2000s. They've been trying to do this to us. Wow. And Representative Harriet Hagman and RCAF USA and some private individuals have just formed lawsuits one after another to stop this, and we've been successful so far. However, they've taken a step further now, and they're just ignoring the demands of the people, like the federal government does so well, right? And so we have to stand up, whether you want to or not. What the long-term consequence of this is you have ranchers out there, number one, that are going to resist. I'm going to resist. I'm not doing that. I don't want to do that. And number two, we're losing all of our kids. They're not coming back to the ranch because it's not profitable. So these older ranchers, they're going to say, I'm done. Why would I do that at the end of my career, spend thousands of dollars getting the cattle up and putting these tags in, risk getting them hurt, and then I have to have this everywhere I go with these cattle. It's not worth it to me. I'm getting out of the business. So then we have a loss of productivity of producers more than what we have now. I mean, since COVID, we've lost 17,000 per year across America. And wow. So it's all interwoven and it's all circular. There's so many things that it affects. And listen, I think that a vast majority of independent thinkers, of true independent ranchers and thinkers, are going to say, we're not doing it. I mean, Bill, this is no joke. The federal government gave the states all RFID tags because they're going to pay for it at first. North Dakota ran out in the first week. They don't even have them. So, I mean, it's inefficient already.
It's already happening.
It's already happening.
So what happens if they cross state lines? What's the
Well, that's a good question. What is going to happen if they cross state lines? I mean, are they going to be able, like if I was to ship my cattle from Texas to Colorado now, a breeding age animal, I have to have a health certificate on that animal already. That's not a problem. I've been doing that for a long time. We do that. But if I ship my cattle, like I live near the Red River, if I move my cattle from one pasture in Texas to one of my pastures in Oklahoma, do they have to have that? Am I going to get in trouble? I mean, the question's so far out,
what are the consequences?
Yeah. What are the consequences? Are they going to come put us all in jail? Are they going to seize our land? What are they going to do? Because there's a lot of people that are out there saying, we ain't doing it. We ain't doing it.
And they did a test run in Michigan, right?
Do what? Didn't
they do a test run on this in Michigan?
No, that Michigan requires an RFID tag, the way I understand.
There was what's happened there? Or is it happening anywhere else?
From the only thing I see about it in Michigan, of course, Michigan is not a large cattle producing state. The only thing I see about it on social media is that it's very inefficiently and ill run by the government. And I mean, why wouldn't it be? They can't run anything. They don't run anything properly. So.
And then you got to wonder. And I know I'm kind of like there's a lot of things that now there's a lot of things coming to my mind. And from all your great information, there's not many meat processing companies in America. And from what I'm hearing, many of them are owned by foreign entities.
Correct.
And so now if you got an RFID chip in, say, Texas or Oklahoma, and maybe there's no processing places in the state that you're in, maybe you're in Missouri, you have a little cattle ranch in Missouri, and you can't, there's no meat, I'm just guessing, there's no meat processing people there, and you got to go to Oklahoma or Texas, but you get the RFID chip tracking you. Now you're faced with penalties and regulations, and what do you do?
Yeah, this is one of the concerns raised by Representative Harriet Hagman. Wyoming is a very large cattle producing state, yet there are very few feed yards, and there are virtually zero large processing facilities in the state. So then they have to go to Nebraska to be killed. So then what happens to those ranchers that don't comply there? I mean, Is it going to be one of those deals? That's the whole question. Is it going to be one of those deals where you have to comply to get in the market, or is it going to be one of those deals where it's going to build more local and regional processing facilities within these states? So that would be great, right?
Right.
So that's what's yet to be seen. We just don't know how it's going to play out yet. And I do know that, you know, I've talked to several producers in Australia, and they implemented it years ago, and it's a total sham. It's a total train wreck because their computer systems and their data systems were not ready for that many
And
numbers.
this is where
Well,
again, you said?
in Australia. And
Yeah.
so what happens to the when a cow loses an ear tag, which she's going to lose out on the prairie, what happens to that number? What happens when a cow dies? What happens to the data on that cow? You know, there's so many questions. And then how are the numbers kicked out of the system? Are we just going to keep pushing RFID numbers through the system until we have a 70-digit line in the RFID tag? You know,
Like
these
a
are
like
all
a like a
questions.
VIN number for a car. You
Exactly.
know, and
It's
the
the same
the
thing.
fourth digit tells you the, you know, where, you know, what the cow was fed. The fifth digit tells you, you know, but
Correct.
and you still, nobody really knows what the penalties are going to be if you
No,
all don't follow these rules. They're kind of
not
keeping you
only
in the dark on that.
not only penalties, but who's going to police it? You know, right now it's the sale barns that are going to have to police it. And of course, you know, the federal government, I'm sure, is working with those four big uh, 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 oligarchs that control the supply chain, the four big packers that control the supply chain, and say, hey, you guys can't accept any cattle without that RFID tag. That may be happening, maybe in the works. They may require it. Who knows? These are all questions that we have to figure it out. And it's just all it is another control mechanism. And these people who are crying, you know, it's all about disease traceability. We need to know where these diseases are coming from. Well, number one, we have a great traceability program in the United States. Number two, the foot and mouth disease in the early 2000s, we trace that right back to Canada. We have this ability already. And if they were
Without the
so
government,
damn
without the
worried,
government.
yeah, and if they were so worried, excuse me, about these diseases and this disease traceability, why did we move Plum Island off the coast of New York into Manhattan, Kansas, in the middle of cattle country, where we store and research all of the world's most deadly diseases of plants and animals? Why did we do that? I don't understand all of this that is happening, but it's all very nefarious in my
They
mind.
moved Plum Island to the center of the United States, you said?
That's right. In a partnership with Kansas State University, Plum Island is now in Manhattan, Kansas, or it's in construction to be in Manhattan, Kansas right now.
And what's amazing is you said that, like, the RFID chips and all these new regulations, the narrative to push these agendas is that it's a better way to track the cows for the health of the people. It's, you
Correct.
know, it's, oh, this is all for the greater good, which we know that the greater good is really just a road paved to hell, right?
Right.
So I mean, I kind of you know, mix up a couple of different analogies, but either way, you know, it's all for the greater good, and that's how they're ushering it in. But you just
Correct.
now made the point that you all, that cattle ranchers used to do this without all of this technology and before control. And so now it's obvious that the reason why they're doing it now for the greater good, air quote here, is for the purpose of connecting it to getting control over the land later, putting ranchers out of business, attacking their land, you know, take over land for the
Correct.
purpose to meet their agenda of, you know, not only, you know, owning land and controlling humans, but to their their eugenics plan, if you will, which is
Yep.
still put in place by Planned Parenthood, which is why it was, you know, Planned
Yep.
Parenthood was started to cull the herd, no pun intended, and eliminate
Correct.
black people from the human herd, if you will, here in America. And that's what we're faced with just on that there. So how will small cattle production versus large productions be affected? Will the small farmer be affected, or is this just
Yes.
targeting the big farmers?
No. It's compliance by all. Everybody has to comply. So those guys in the South that run 10 to 20 cattle in their herd size, they're probably going to say, screw it. I'm not doing that. It's not worth it to me. I don't want them into my business. the corporate oligarchs that are following the industry standards, they'll probably do it because they want it's all about the money, right? It's all about the money. Follow the money. Always,
Right.
always follow the money. And so they'll probably do it. But the mid-size to smaller farmers and ranchers, I just can't see a whole lot of them complying, and I may be totally wrong about that. I don't know. It doesn't seem like. Well, number one, we have to educate them better. We're not doing a good job of educating them because so many don't even know about it. I mean, they're all in the dark. These sale barns, the sale barns in America, the vast majority of them do not support it because they're going to be tasked with policing it. They already have to police the beef checkoff. They already have to police brand inspection. They don't want to police one more thing for free, right? That's not what they're intended to do. But their organization that bonds them all, the Livestock Marketing Association, has not taken a stand on it. They're neutral, and that doesn't make sense to me because they represent all these sale barns that are going to be tasked with implementing. So if let's just say today, if they want to comply by November 5th, and I take 1,000 head of breeding cows that don't have the tag, and I want to sell them on November 6th, whatever sale barn I take them to on November 6th has to run 1,000 cows through the sale barn, through the chute, and put a tag in its ear. I mean, is that even feasible? How many more people do they have to hire? How much more power do they have to pay for electricity to run the chutes and all
It's
of this?
it's almost like like so many other government schemes and so
Yes.
many other government plans and so many other plans created in these bureaucratic agencies are designed to collapse the system to
Yes.
be able to allow government to come in and
Yes.
get more control. And and I think that is what it all comes down to.
Where we're at.
Um, I'll give you two of my final thoughts, and then I'll ask you another question, and we'll wrap up. Is that I live in Louisiana, and I've seen a lot of laws and legislation go through the Louisiana legislature that like there was one where you could not sell raw milk. They were trying to ban raw milk for for the greater good, health purposes, whatever. Well, some people went to work and they got a law that said no. If I want to buy raw milk, I can.
Awesome.
The biggest problem we are having in America is that the citizens of their sovereign states are forgetting that we have a 10th Amendment, and the government has learned to pierce the veil of the 10th Amendment with money and these and going through these bureaucratic agencies. We the people are forgetting how much power we have if we show up at all of our state legislatures and we find legislators that will pass laws and legislation in our states that say, hey, U.S. government, we reject your RFID tags. We have enough Republican legislators here or enough freedom, liberty-minded legislators here in this state or whatever state you're in that we're going to pass a law that basically says, look at my middle finger, we're not putting the RFID chips on there because we are a sovereign state that is going to reject your federal law because we've got the 10th Amendment. And so what if you're going to hold back our money? We would rather freedom and liberty in a sovereign state and live as free individuals in a sovereign state than have your federal money and live by your laws and subject ourselves to your regulations. And if we don't have a slaughterhouse, okay, we'll get together and we'll create one.
Right.
Let capitalism do its job.
That's
let
right.
let freedom and liberty reign.
Yes.
And that's how we win in that. Shad, I know we're nearing the end here of your time. Do you have any final thoughts and words of wisdom?
Well, I've not.
And what the American people can do?
I don't have a lot of wisdom, but I do have some thoughts. And I always say they always ask me at the end of my talks, like, how do we fix this? And there's a lot of ways that we can fix this. We have to become involved at the lowest level of government in our communities. Do we want to? No. But if we don't do it, if good America loving, freedom loving, liberty loving, freedom makers don't do it, somebody else with nefarious agendas is going to. We have to
Right.
get involved on the. We have to hold our state legislators and our national legislators accountable, and that means calling them and forming personal relationships with them, and reminding them about corruption. They get tired of me. I know that. We have to buy American. We have to demand American made and buy local. We have to do that. Is it going to be more expensive? Yes, but that's how we beat the corporate oligarchy, corporate global
Right.
oligarchy. We have to do these things, and that not only supports America, but it keeps your community afloat. And see, what has happened is the corporate lobby has hollowed out America. What did Walmart do to rural America? It
Right.
decimated rural America. Now Dollar General and the Dollar Tree are finishing it up. We're closing schools across the nation, and it's just there. It's what President Trump says: make America great again. America has to be our first priority. God, family, country. We cannot take care of these foreigners. And I'm not against immigration, but I'm against illegal immigration.
That's right.
I am. We cannot take care of these other countries. Why has the Biden
That's right.
administration sent billions to Ukraine? Ukraine is a corrupt country. Yes, Russia, Putin, he's a commie son of a buck. But Ukraine's no better. Ukraine's over there burning churches down, arresting people in churches right now. Why are we sending our money away? That doesn't make sense. We have people in North Carolina that need help right now. People are living in tents in North Carolina, in East Tennessee after Hurricane Helene. We have people that have been burned out in southern Montana and northern Wyoming just in the last 2 weeks until it snowed a couple of days ago. The Texas Panhandle was decimated. The American people need help. The people who really put food on our tables, the working people of America need help. And so we have to focus on our families and our communities, because once our family and our community and ourselves, we are prosperous, we give that money away. That's who we are as Americans. God doesn't say, he doesn't force us to give our money. He says, give from the heart, right? Give from the heart. And when you're prosperous, you're going to give from the heart. It's just natural. So, that's really all I have to say. But we have to make a choice right now: tyranny or liberty. And I always remind people, don't ever forget, at the end of the day, tyranny has no loyalty. One tyrant is going to turn on the last tyrant. Those two tyrants left, and one's going to kill the other one. So be loyal to your country and your family. And I'm not going to tell anybody who to vote for as long as it's Trump. But
Look,
listen, in all seriousness, just go out and vote. That is your fiduciary duty as an American. You know how many people in other countries would give anything to mark a box? Oh my gosh, what a great privilege!
I tell all my listeners, I say, of course, I'm a Republican. I want you to vote for Trump, but honestly, I just want people to vote, because the
Yes,
problem is that complacency has set in our country so much that's how and why politicians are able to get away with
yes,
what they're getting away with. The reality is this: if we all started working together a little bit more and we all voted on a regular basis, elected officials would know, hey, 95% of the people are showing up at the polls. We can't get away with that. When they sneak in these, higher taxes, new taxes in these off-season elections, at times, and then nobody's going to show up, and they know, hey, at the last governor's race, or the last presidential race, only 50% of people show up to the poll. They know only half the country is paying attention. So they know, Congress knows, what can we get away with based on the last turnout. We know that
right.
less than half the country is paying attention. So if everybody got out and vote, regardless of who you voted for, like you said, I'm not going to try to convince people otherwise, as long as they vote for Trump. Is that, hey, when we are all involved, they know that they have to listen to us, and they can't get away with their shenanigans.
That's right, Bill. And did you know that the Sustains Act was passed through an appropriations bill in 2023? Nobody even knew about it. It was snuck in there. Nobody even knew about it. So that's why we have to keep these legislators accountable. You know, G.T. Thompson. I'm a registered Republican, but
Right.
I see myself more now as a constitutional conservative than I
Right.
do a Republican, because you know them big Republicans that have gone, well, I guess they're called Rhino Republicans, and
Right.
they've gone into Washington D.C. and the first thing that happens is somebody pays them, and then all of a sudden they have no integrity. Then
That's
we're
right.
lost, you know. So
Shad, you're absolutely amazing. I want to stay in touch with you, and I really do. I'm gonna find a way to get your information out there more and more with this podcast, and I hope that everybody who's listening to this podcast shares the podcast with not only a rancher but someone who just loves America and a good steak.
hey man, I do love America. You know, I just think about all of these men and women who have shed blood in the name, chokes me up, in the name of freedom, uh, you know, to create the greatest country on earth. We were a shining beacon on the hill, and our forefathers had such vision and such. I just think it was godlike vision when they created our founding documents, that they knew
Right.
we would be where we are right now. And I want these kids to taste that sweet taste of freedom. That's what it's all about. I just think we live in an amazing country. And is there a lot of dark in it right now? Yep, there is. But you know what? The Lord says, if we will turn from our wicked ways, He will show us favor again. And I believe in that. I truly believe in that. But I also believe that we may be on a precipice of being too far gone, and so we have to right the wrongs. And it starts right here. Hold on. It starts right here with ourselves, looking in the mirror,
Right.
and then that flows into our family. It's all about leadership, and it flows into our homes, and then our communities, our schools, and then ultimately into government. Man, wouldn't it be nice to go back to the good days?
That's right. Amen, brother. I got to tell my listeners all the time, I think America is headed in the wrong direction and we're in a bad place,
We
and
are.
things are possibly going to get worse. How much worse they get all depends on how many people we wake up in the meantime. And I would love it if people who listen to this video share it with somebody else. Let's wake up some other people. Shad, once again, thank you so much for being on my show today. I really appreciate it.
I
And
appreciate you having me on, Bill. I hope it helped. And, you know, if I can be of any help to you later on, let me know.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Everybody else, please share the interview and also share the video. Thank you so much. God bless America, and tune in for more. Thank you again.
And where there is beef, there is liberty.